All right. Hello, and thank you for joining today. My name is Rob Hlavaty, and this is the pilot episode, or I guess the introductory episode for a new podcast that I'm calling Writing on the Walls. I'm the host of another show called Breathing Room. I'll link that in the show notes. I started Breathing Room back in 2019 to explore the intersection between mental health and creativity. So on that show, I've interviewed musicians, artists, as well as some mental health professionals to understand their creative process a little bit better and understand how it impacts their overall mental and emotional well-being. So what I'm here to do today is explain a little bit about this show, Writing on the Walls, and maybe provide just a snippet of my own story and hopefully explain why it is that I'm interested in doing this show. So the goal of this show is to provide a platform, number one, for survivors of suicide loss, that is individuals who have lost a loved one to suicide, for them to share their stories and honor their loved ones. In addition, I'd like to give a space for survivors of attempted suicide to share their stories, kind of what led up to the event and how life has been for them since. And finally, I would like to bring in the expertise of subject matter experts in the mental health, suicide research, and substance abuse fields to better understand the rising rates in completed suicides as well as suicide attempts, and also understand what we can do from a prevention standpoint. So a little bit about how I got here and the name of the show, Writing on the Walls. So September 6th, 2017, I got the call that my dad, Rob Hlavaty Sr., had completed suicide. It was the first time in my life that I'd lost a close loved one to suicide. And for the first 2 weeks after he died, a lot of people were coming by my parents' house to pay condolences and bring food and just spend time. And I'm not too sure how I got the idea, but before I would let anyone leave the house, I would make them go into the basement and write a message on the wall, either a memory of my dad or a note to him. And before long, there was a lot of stuff up there on the walls. And it really showed me just how much my dad meant to all of these people. Over time, the writing on the walls, if you will, became clear. The warning signs that we missed that my dad was struggling in the first place. So I've definitely had my own journey in the 5 years that it's been since losing my dad. And the more I try to come to terms with and accept what happened, I find myself really curious about other people who have gone through similar things. And at the risk of totally beating it to death, that's the writing on the walls that I look to do with this show. Continuing the stories of those who are no longer here, sharing memories and things that we've learned, and try to use history as a mechanism for understanding how we can start to avoid this from happening as frequently as it is. I realized a lot after losing my dad. I learned how common this issue is. Suicide rates are steadily on the rise in our country, as well as in many countries around the world. And, my dad is certainly part of this group, but I find myself wondering what it is that makes men over the age of 25 the most impacted group by completed suicides. In the year 2020, just about 70% of those in the United States who completed suicide were men over the age of 25. So that is something I would definitely like to explore with this show. Why is it that men are 4 times more likely to complete suicide than women? Especially understanding that women attempt suicide at a higher rate. I'd also like to explore, is masculinity getting in the way of men seeking help for suicidal ideation? Is there a difference in the core messaging that men and women receive that could be impacting the issue? I'd also like to explore how suicide affects vulnerable groups, amongst the LGBT community, indigenous populations, and also those suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, such as soldiers and first responders. I think there's a lot of underrepresentation and maybe underreporting of suicide that might somewhat skew the statistics. Another thing that I learned is how little support there is for families who are grieving a suicide. There are a lot of great organizations out there: American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, the JED Foundation, National Institute of Mental Health, and they're doing a lot of great work in the prevention space. I didn't find as many resources available in the response space. Losing my dad to suicide was completely different than any other loss I'd ever gone through. And I really felt like my family, we were on our own to navigate the aftermath of that. And I really would love for there to be some resources for families and friends who are going through a loss like this for the first time, and hopefully the last. I think that's all I had to say about that. What I hope to do with this show, first and foremost, is to honor my dad. I learned a lot from my dad. I was very close with him, and would like to share a little bit about his story and how I think he got to the place he did to make his final decision. I do believe that has the ability to help other people who are possibly in a similar boat, either struggling with their own suicidal ideation or being in my shoes, having lost someone that they love to suicide. And I would also like to provide individuals whose lives have been impacted by suicide attempts a safe container to process it. So I think this is a good time to plug that I'm sure the episodes will come with their own trigger warning for anyone who has dealt with suicidal ideation or attempted suicide or lost a loved one to suicide. There definitely could be some sensitive topics discussed in these episodes. And, finally, I would like to continue to write on the walls and commemorate those that we've lost. I think that's all I have for now. I appreciate you tuning in, and look forward to coming at you with new episodes soon. Again, this is Rob Hlavaty. Thank you for listening.